Well, we're still wearing our masks and being careful. But I feel like I've been to the vets. I tell people I've had my shots. By the way, I hate to say this after that beautiful music, but somebody ought to just go beat Paula with a stick if she ever says retire again. Oh, okay. Well, don't you retire from that stuff now. What a blessing you are. Thank you so much. You all are just gracious. By the way, and I just want to express my deep appreciation for Pastor Mark, too. Just a dear friend. You know, one reason I'll always remember this church, you all ever been on a church bus? What do they do regularly? Break down. Y'all sing, you're being a lot more spiritual. They break down. Anyway, I had just taken our group of kids from the Methodist Children's Home down to Epworth by the Sea for a weekend retreat, and we were driving back home, and it broke down up there on I-16. And so I called Mark, and I think a couple of people here got together, and they got some bottles of water and brought them to us. And I thought, this is a church that cares. And not just on Sunday, but when there's a need. That's what the people of God do, isn't it? And you all just made that come alive. You know, when our kids, they won't remember it was Calvary in Swainsboro. But they'll remember sometime, somewhere, we were all broken down and hot beside the road. Somebody brought water. Aren't you glad when Jesus told the story, he didn't say, even if you just give $1 million to a person, you're giving it to Jesus. Well, we would say, well, that maybe, a few rich people can do that. But Jesus didn't say that. What did he say? If you give even what? A cup of cold water to somebody. You all did that. And Jesus was not speaking figuratively. I mean, sometimes we think, oh yeah, it's just sort of no. When you gave that water to our kids at the Methodist home, you gave it to Jesus. And so in behalf of Jesus, in the form of our kids, I want to say thank you for caring for our kids at the Methodist home. Just a quick word here about the home. We have had some cases of COVID on the campuses. When that happens, we shut down a cottage for the 10 days or 2 weeks, and everybody in that cottage stays quarantined. But we made it through just fine. Nobody's been seriously sick. Staff, we've had some. But we've had only one person that I know of who has been in the hospital, and that person got out and was fine. So God has been gracious to us, and we are grateful, and I just wanted to bring you that word quickly. So, by the way, if it's okay with you, I'm going to put this jar up on the communion table. And I'm going to, I didn't come here to get money, but I never want to fail to give people an opportunity to give. So I'm putting in a 50 here. You all know who's on a 50? Grant, probably our least sober president. Anyway, I'm going to put this in this jar. This is Nathan's jar. Nathan, after I was in a small church somewhere down here in South Georgia, and he came up and gave this jar. It had coins in the bottom and some crumpled dollar bills and stuff. It wasn't a lot of money in it at all. But he gave it to me, and then afterwards somebody said, you know why he gave it? His daddy's in jail and his mom's on drugs. He was fortunate enough to have grandparents to take him in. A lot of our kids don't even have that. And he said, but he understood what you were talking about. And he wanted to give that money to the kids at the Methodist home. That just touched me so deeply. I said, can I have the jar, or does he want it back? He said, no, you can have the jar too. So I've taken Nathan's jar, which didn't have a lot of money in it, but God has used it and turned it into thousands of dollars. to bless our kids. So I'm just going to put this up there. Don't feel under obligation, but I always want to give people an opportunity to give. And before I forget to do that, let me just set this in. And if you don't have anything, you might just take one of these green envelopes for the home and give that. Later on, just mail that. You remember the preacher who got up and said, well, last week, I know my sermon had 17 points, so this week my sermon's going to be pointless. Well, I don't want to have a pointless sermon, but I have a one-point sermon. While we're on our way there, and I think let's go to about verse 18, and I'm just going to pick up a few verses here. This is the story about Joseph. Joseph, remember, has in the Old Testament, has these dreams that he's going to rule over his brothers. And you know how that went over with his brothers. They hated him. And so the story picks up where the people have gone on. All his brothers are out taking care of the sheep. His dad sends him out in his robe of many colors, which, you know, ticked his brothers off even more. They all have ordinary stuff. He's the favorite son. And he goes out there to check on them. And when they see him, here's what happens. Can we go maybe to about verse 18 on there? Okay, here. They saw him from a distance. And before he came near to them, they conspired to, what are the next two words? Kill him. You know, we use that expression, don't we? I could just kill him. They meant it. Tough crowd. Okay, and then, or they said to one another, listen to this, here comes that dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what becomes of his dreams. Our kids at the Methodist home are surrounded, have grown up with dream killers all their lives. The very people that ought to protect them the most instead have taken their dreams, have wounded them, crushed them. And when God sends them to us, and I always tell the kids, I'm sorry you have to be here. I know some circumstances have gone wrong in your life that have brought you to us at the home, but we believe God sent you to us. We don't always know why. We don't know. Some kids are with us just a short time, some longer, but we believe God sent them to us. And so what we try to do is, in some way, we want to help give their dream back to them. I remember Chris one day saying in front of a group, he said, this is my goal in life, to prove that my family was wrong when they said I'd never amount to anything. I mean, what kind of a family is that? I mean, I know what y'all are like. Y'all told your children, tell your grandchildren, you know, you can do this, you can accomplish that. You tell them you can. Chris grew up with, you can't. Well, you know what? God gives all of us the opportunity to speak hope into the lives of people. And so a lot of times when there are children around, I like to just get down on their eye level and say, hey, you know what? God has a great plan for your life. And across the years, you're going to find people who say, psst, come over here. Here's a shortcut. This is an easier way. This is another way. Don't listen to them. Because God's dream for you is the greatest thing in your life. I may never see that kid again, but I want to speak a vision into their life. I want to speak hope. I want to speak God's dream into their life. So here's that's my one point, is God gives us dreams. But I want to just, before we come to communion here, tag on one more thing to it. Joseph, when he first had the dreams, we don't know how old he was, teenager, 15-ish maybe, and so he has this dream, And do y'all remember what you were like when you were 15? Yeah, some of us are shaking our heads. No, I can't remember that far back. Others of us are thinking, okay, I've been trying to forget that. But you know how arrogant we were? 15, you want to be all grown up and stuff. And so when he has these dreams and tells his brothers about them, you know what he's probably thinking? Oh, boy, I'm going to be bigger and better and badder than you guys. I mean, that's what a kid does. You know what God's dream was? Not for Joseph to say, nanny, nanny, boo, boo, I'm, more powerful than you. You know why God gave those dreams to Joseph? To hold him through the bad times, but the dream was not for him to rule over his brothers. The dream was for him to save his brothers. Because if you remember the end of the story, Joseph wise comes through a wonderful story to be second in command in Egypt, and during the 7 years of plenty, stores up grain and all that. If you don't remember the story in detail, go back. You can't do anything better this afternoon than pick up Genesis 37 and read to the end of the book. It is the most fascinating story in the Bible, except for Jesus' story, with twists and turns you couldn't imagine. But anyway, in the end, Joseph's brothers come and he saves them. And in saving them, he saves Israel. And in saving Israel, saves the line through whom the Messiah comes. And so Joseph is absolutely a key here, and this is the dream that God gave him. Not for him to say, look how God used me, but rather to say, oh, God has put me here to help save my family and to be a part of God's plan. So, here's the little story that I love to tell, and with this we're going to go to communion. There were two boys walking home from school one day and did not know each other. So one boy is in front carrying a huge armful of books and papers and pens and pencils and stuff. You get the picture in your mind? And all of a sudden, one of the books shifts. Come on, y'all, what happens next? It all goes, there's an explosion of stuff on the floor, on the sidewalk there. Well, the kid behind sees this. So he goes and starts picking up and, handing him stuff and say, let me help you. And then he stops and he says, well, no wonder you dropped it. There's too much stuff to carry. He says, do you live near here? And the kid who dropped the book said, yeah, a couple blocks over here. And so he said, well, let me help you out. And so he picks up, and both of the boys, now did not know each other, go to take the stuff home. When they get to the home, the boy who dropped the books says to the other kid, you want to come in for a few minutes? And the other kid says, okay. Fast forward. The two kids become best friends. Fast forward. Graduation. The kid who dropped the books is the valedictorian of the class. An experience I have not had. And so, the valedictorian gets to get up and give a little speech. So the kid gets up, and here's what he said. Nobody who was there ever forgot it. He said, I'm going to tell you all something that even my best friend, John, and everybody knew who it was, a small community, even he does not know. One day, I was going home from school, and I had all this stuff, and I dropped it, and that's when John and I met and became best friends. But the reason I was taking all that stuff home was I had just cleaned out my locker because I was going home that night to take my own life. And I didn't want my parents to have to clean it up. So that day, he didn't help me pick up my books. That day, he saved my life. Now, brothers and sisters, some of us think, we kind of gotten trapped in this, I've got to do something great, or, what is some big thing? I want to tell you, God is calling us this week. It doesn't matter if we're 5 or 95. God is calling us this week to do the next right thing. That's it. We never know. Just like the boy who helped him pick up the stuff. He didn't have any idea. He was just doing the next right thing. He didn't know he was going to save this kid's life by giving him hope for one more day. He just did the next right thing. So we're going to come to communion today. We're going to receive forgiveness and mercy for the things we have done wrong, for the things we have failed to do right. And we're going to find strength and vision to go do the next right thing. So,